Tonight on Free Minds TV, we catch up with Richard Van Wickler, Superintendent for the Cheshire County Department of Corrections, to talk some common sense about the war on drugs. Also this week, the New Hampshire House voted on HB 1623, decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana in the state of New Hampshire. Free Minds TV was on the scene, and we'll be bringing you the results of how the House voted. We're also going to be getting into this week's Downsizer Dispatch and a whole lot more when we come back on Free Minds TV. Welcome to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. I am Toby Islin.
I'm Nick Michaelevich.
All right, this week we are going to be talking drug policy. It's a common theme here on in America and here on Free Minds TV, but talking about incarcerating people, because as we've talked about before, America incarcerates more people than any other country in the world. Well, we wanted to know why this is, so we went over and talked to Richard Van Wickler, who's the superintendent at the Department of Corrections right here in Cheshire County, where we broadcast from, to see what his opinion on why this is. Well, I think that he's going to describe things better than we ever could. So let's take a look at what Van Wickler thinks the problem with American jails are. After all, he runs one.
The issues with respect to the war on drugs is, which is based on a lot of misinformation, not factual information, is that if you take a person away from the opportunity to do drugs and lock them up, when you release them, they'll no longer have the desire to do drugs. It's simply not true.
People incarcerated than any other country in the world. And as a superintendent of a county jail, can you give us any insights on why you think that is?
Well, there are a lot of different theories. The latest statistic that I've heard about the population versus incarceration is that the United States has about 5% of the world's population, and we have 25% of the world's inmates. So there's a significant disparity there between the people per 100,000 versus the number of people incarcerated per 100,000. Recently in the news, it was cited that for the first time in the history of the United States, we now incarcerate 1 per every 100 people in this country, which is pretty significant. There are a lot of different schools of thought about what's causing that. When you look at the academics of it, you look at the textbooks, people that do research, criminal justice experts that are trying to get their finger on the pulse of why this is. It seems to come directly to the war on drugs is responsible for a significant part of this increase. And that has to be so, because when we look at the data, we see that violent crime in the United States is at a 30-year low. So if violent crimes are at a 30-year low, it begs the question of why do we have to continue to build 900 new jail beds every 2 weeks in this country? Why do we have to hire another 150 correctional officers every 2 weeks in this country?
What's the breakdown between people who are here for victimless crimes and those for crimes against persons and property?
It's a moving target, quite frankly, and it depends on the jurisdiction where you're looking at. I've read periodicals that say 40% of the country's inmate population doesn't need to be incarcerated. When we look at the number of people that are here and what percentage are considered a threat of flight, escape, or violence, we're about on par with that figure.
Really facilitates rehabilitation as far as arrests for drug use. It's not gonna make people well.
My position on rehabilitation is this. We have 65% of the inmates that come into this institution. That would be 65% of around 1,600 inmates a year. When we ask them, are you interested in rehabilitation programs? They say yes. And then they get processed into the system. And only 6% participate in those programs. You can't mandate those programs. The person has to be willing and want to do them. So what we see is that there is a lack of self-motivation to engage in something that would help them. And you can't force that. You cannot say to an addicted person, or to a person who abuses drugs, or to a person who simply uses drugs, we're going to mandate this program for you, and when you get out, you won't want to do that anymore.
Background on what the organization is and maybe how long you've been a member.
Law Enforcement Against Prohibition was founded in, I want to say, 2003, I think, and it started with 5 founding members. They were police detectives and undercover agents who worked for the Drug Task Force in this country, putting thousands of people into the prison system. All of these police officers, and some of them are very distinguished. We're talking about Chief Stamper, who was the assistant chief in San Diego, the police chief of Seattle, Washington. You're talking about Jack Cole, who was undercover in New Jersey for some 26 years. Peter Christ, who was the patrol captain in Tonawanda, New York for many years. These are people who have worked in areas with greater populations than we have here, greater drug problems than we have here, have retired admirably, are still considered very admirable representatives of law enforcement. And those 5 founding members have now recruited almost 10,000 people to have joined Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. Almost 1,000 of those are police officers. There are judges, there are detectives, there are United States Marshals that are members of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, and we are growing significantly every day. And because we believe that the war on drugs is a significantly failed policy. My involvement with LEAP happened back in December of 2007, just this last year, a few months ago, and I was challenged by a state legislator to view a 12-minute video of LEAP, which anybody can view on the website. You just click on it and you can see the 12-minute video. But he had it on a CD and he gave it to me, and I viewed it, and I was so intrigued and impressed with the level of professionalism and the resumes of the people, the founding people of LEAP, that I listened to their message, and I actually contacted the Speakers Bureau and said, I really want a speaker to come to where I teach and talk to the students here. And so they provided us with a speaker. And after that, we had some emailings back and forth, and I was kind of on the fence because, you know, when you're first approached with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, it makes you nervous if you're a law enforcement person. It's like that dedicated soldier who's out on the battlefield, and the veteran soldier comes up and says, gee, I don't think this is a good idea. And of course the young guy's out there trying to do the right thing because that's what he's told, that's what he's trained. So it makes you nervous, it makes you a little bit apprehensive, but when you begin to talk to the veterans, you begin to understand the battles that they've been in, the fight that they've fought, how they come to the decision where they are, you begin to take those steps in that direction. And LEAP said, tell you what, we'd love you to come to New Orleans to a conference, and we'll pay the conference fee, and we'll put you up for a weekend, and all you got to do is whatever you want to do. You know, we'd like you to sit in on some of these trainings, and if you do, it'll be great. If not, that's fine. Just, you know, make yourself comfortable. So I went to this conference in New Orleans, and I sat in on these different trainings and was absolutely blown away by what I learned about the statistical data that exists through government sources that suggests that the war on drugs is a failed policy. And that's where I met a lot of the LEAP members and decided in December of 2007 that I would join. And very shortly thereafter, I became a vetted speaker for LEAP, and I'm happy to do that.
Welcome back. I mean, I don't think you can really get much clearer than that. And you could really listen to this guy talk forever if you want common sense on the drug policy.
Right, and this is a guy who works every day in the correctional system. So he actually deals with people who are there for these crimes, and he's saying that it's not, what we're doing right now is not effective and we need to try something new. So, you know, him saying it, I think it carries more weight than some other people that are saying it, and I really hope more people in his field come forward and just have an honest discussion about this.
Right, and we talked to him for quite a while. We actually couldn't show the whole thing on this week's episode, but we think what he has to say is very important. So we are going to be showing the second half of the interview we did with him on next week's show. So tune in next week if you want to get the second half. And also, if you are watching this here on Cheshire TV, where we originally broadcast from, you can see the whole thing unedited. If you live outside the area and want to watch it, well, it's going to be on our members site. So log on to freemindstv.com if you want to watch the whole interview unedited. But tune in next week for the second half of the interview as well. All right, when we come back, we were in Concord, New Hampshire to talk drug policy. HB 1623 is up for vote. The House voted on it. We were there on the scenes. We'll be right back and talking about how they voted and how things went with video right after this.
Can change America for the better.
Welcome to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you, the viewer, to think outside the box. I am Toby Island.
And I'm Nick Michaelovich.
All right, we were traveling off to Concord this week to check out on the bill we've been reporting on, HB 1623, which is decriminalizing small amounts of marijuana in the state of New Hampshire. Well, I guess we got to show the viewers how things went in there. I mean, this bill it's a step in the right direction. Before we take a look at how the House voted and the video of it, we just want to caveat this by saying it's a step in the right direction. It's a very small amounts of marijuana that would be decriminalized under this bill. But before we really get much into that, we got to see how the House voted. So let's take a look at Free Minds TV on the scenes in Concord, New Hampshire.
If you're in favor, you'll be pressing the green button. If you're opposed, you'll be pressing the red button. Voting stations are open for 30 seconds. The House will be attentive to the state of the vote. 193 having voted in the affirmative, 141 in the negative. The minority committee report is adopted. The House will be in order. The majority of the Committee on Environment and Agriculture, regarding House Bill 1429. The House will be in order.
Matt Simon, House Bill 1623 just took another milestone. What was that?
I think milestone is a very good word. A vote of 193 to 141. The New Hampshire House has just determined that individuals who are arrested for less than a quarter ounce of marijuana should not be threatened with jail time at all. They should be subject only to a violation offense and a $200 fine. So it proves to me that if you do things right and you get citizens involved and people call their legislators and an effective action is taken, that we really can change bad laws. And it's just one step. We still have the Senate to go to, certainly in the governor's office, but it's a tremendously, the odds were stacked pretty heavily against us by most people going into this vote. But people have been calling their reps, they've been emailing their reps, they've been getting mail and hearing about this, and the media has been terrific. So
the subcommittee actually said that they shouldn't pass this, but it was gone against. So there were several votes there. Do you think that all has to do with people contacting their reps and getting involved in the legislative process?
Well, for every individual legislator, I am sure the equation is different. What causes them to press the red button or the green button when it comes time to vote. And there are a lot of different considerations. As you know, there's so much misinformation and disinformation that floats around on marijuana policy. And when you first raise the issue, they have a tendency to react and say, well, I don't like marijuana, I'm going to vote against the bill because it's a pro-marijuana bill. And when you get them to actually look at the effects of policy and the unintended consequences of marijuana prohibition, this is a very mild step, but it's a very solid step in the right direction at the same time.
How much marijuana would this decriminalize in New Hampshire?
The amended version, which is what passed, is a quarter ounce or less, and of course that's still subject to being taken up by the Senate. All the terms of the bill are still nothing set in stone, but we're very happy to be moving forward and not taking an extended vacation.
All right, what is their timeline here before it goes to the Senate and then hopefully to the governor's office? How long are we talking here?
Your guess is as good as mine.
If people want to get involved and hopefully contact the senators when it comes up, where do they go to again?
There will be loads of information at nhcommonsense.org, a site which I expect will be very busy in the coming days and weeks.
All right, Matt Simon, as always, love. Oh, some good news. Apparently, people can make a difference if they are contacting reps. I know that there were many people who were contacting their representatives about this, urging them to vote in favor, and it did pass. First, they had to there were 3 different votes. First, they had to overturn the subcommittee, the Criminal Justice and Safety Subcommittee's ruling of not to pass, and then they had to vote on the subcommittee's recommendations, and then finally the vote that you guys saw was the vote of them actually passing it. So that's some good news, that it's at least made it this far. Next, it's going to go to the Senate. If all's well from there, it'll go to the governor's office and be signed into law, and people possessing a quarter ounce or less of marijuana will no longer have a criminal record and be barred from maybe attending college, getting certain jobs, and really, as we've seen, and Richard Van Wickler, who we interviewed at the beginning of this show, says it best. The LEAP members, Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, says it best when they say, well, you can't get over a
you can get over an addiction, but you can't get over a conviction.
And it makes a lot of sense. So, good step in the right direction for New Hampshire. There's a lot more work to be done, and we will be reporting on that, of course. Also should be noted, while we were there were some other interesting bills going on. Joel Winters, he's a Free Stater, actually, got elected in Manchester to the House of Representatives here in New Hampshire, and he's been putting in some interesting bills. A bill he got through, House Bill 686, the minority version of the bill, got through banning the use of RFIDs in humans without their consent, which is some good news. It also requires labeling on packaging of stuff such as anything with an RFID chip coming into it in New Hampshire, which some people will like, some people won't like, depending on whether you are a fan of RFID or are principled. If you're principled, you say, well, this is a restriction against business. But if you're someone who just doesn't like being tracked and likes privacy in general, it's a good thing. The best thing, the thing I really like about this bill that went through, is it bans the use of the state using RFID in any government-issued license. And so while we have banned Real ID in New Hampshire, well, this is another hedge against it. So another hedge against the government tracking you. So that's some good news. So some good things coming out of Concord. Not always good, but it was a good day earlier this week. All right, well, when we come back, Nick's got an article I haven't seen yet. I've got one he hasn't seen yet. We'll be back with a whole lot more right after this.
You know in your heart that America needs to reform its laws against marijuana. And you can do something about it by joining the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws. Check our website and get involved with a local chapter. If there isn't one in your area, start one. No one should go to prison for smoking a harmless flower, and sick people shouldn't be denied medicine for their illness. Together, we can change America for the better.
Welcome back to Free Minds TV, where we challenge you to think outside the box. I'm Toby Uslin.
And I'm Nick Michaelevich.
All right, we are running short on time, got a lot to get through, so let's get right to it. Looks like justices agree on right to own guns. Well, as we've talked about before, the Supreme Court is hearing testimony on the Second Amendment. Do we have the right to bear arms, or is it more of a collective thing to for a militia or something? Well, our opinion is, well, it's an individual right to own guns. And so far, the Supreme Court has said, well, we're not really sure. We're not going to rule on this quite yet. They say Americans have the right to own guns, Supreme Justices declared on Tuesday in a historic and lively debate that could lead to the most significant interpretation of the Second Amendment since its ratification in 2 centuries. It could. So far, it has not. So far, the justices are saying, well, pretty much as it is before. They really need to, what they're really going to be doing is deciding whether cities such as Washington, D.C. Can ban the use of, say, handguns. Is that constitutional? So they should be coming up with that soon. So far, though, they're not really saying nothing. Seems like they're kind of testing the waters to see how the public feels. I'm not really sure. It's hard to understand what this ruling so far means.
Well, it's very similar to the ruling they made in, I think it was the 1930s. I think it was 39 or 33. I forget which. But they basically ruled that, yes, it's an individual right.
39, you're right.
Right. It's an individual right, but the government can impose certain narrow restrictions. Obviously, we have 20,000 gun laws. How narrow they kept them is up for debate. So the Supreme Court kind of gave a non-answer then. They said, oh, it's a right that can't be infringed, but we can infringe upon it in a reasonable way. So they basically said the same thing. The question is whether the D.C. gun ban in particular is going to be ruled unreasonable. So
it'll be interesting to track.
Yeah, it will be, but it's probably not going to change too much. And we also have some news out of California. We were covering earlier, at least on the audio podcast, that we had found out that California, a court ruling had essentially outlawed homeschooling in that state. And it currently looks as though California is not going to act on that single ruling by that judge. The Jack O'Connell, who is the state superintendent, of public instruction, has said they're not going to enforce that ruling. So basically, homeschooling sounds like it's still going to be legal in California. The ruling had forced anybody who wanted to homeschool their children to have a teacher's certificate. So you'd have to go get a teacher's degree, which is 4 years of school. And
not doable for a lot of parents.
It essentially criminalized homeschooling in the state of California. And even with this ruling, it's still a restrictive state, but it's at least they're not going to effectively outlaw it. You can still do it.
As you mentioned, we did talk about that on the audio podcast. We do that supplementary to this at least once a week. We do a whole show like this, a little bit longer actually, reading articles, talking about different things having to do usually with freedom and liberty. If you want more on that, freemindstv.com, subscribe to the podcast. All right, well, it's in a different place than usual, but we got a couple minutes for it. Nick, what's this week's Downsizer Dispatch?
Well, this week on the Downsizer Dispatch, we're talking about the Enumerated Powers Act, and this was one that was written up originally by downsizedc.org. And what it says is that Congress, every time it passes a new law, it has to cite the piece of legislation, the piece of the Constitution, rather, that justifies the legislation. So they'd have to cite a specific portion.
That's awesome.
Right. So they're supposed to only pass under the Constitution laws which are justified by the Constitution. That says that in Amendment 9, and in Amendment 10 it says if the powers in a certain area aren't granted specifically to the federal government, they're reserved to the states and the people respectively. They don't do this anymore. So this would force them to at least cite a piece of the Constitution, and it would point out sometimes how weak their argument is for legislation being constitutional. So it doesn't necessarily guarantee that we won't see bad unconstitutional laws passed, because they'll probably just try to broadly interpret certain parts of the Constitution, but it would at least point it out to the people that maybe they don't have a strong case to make, because there's a lot of laws they pass that you really can't find any justification for in there. So it would at least point out maybe some of the ways that where Congress is overstepping its bounds, and it would allow the people to see where the government's out of control, where it needs to get fixed.
All right, well, if you want to have your voice be heard on this one, downsizedc.org, easy to sign up and contact those goofballs in Washington, D.C. All right, well, that's just going to about do it for us. I would like to mention something that's going on. We've been talking about this a little bit, but Freedom Fest happening here in Keene. If you're watching this on Cheshire TV, get involved. We've done it before. We did it last year, where all sorts of liberty groups and stuff come out in Keene, going down to Railroad Square right on Main Street, and just having a little bit of fun. That's going to be on April 19th from 12 to 3, I believe. If you want more information on it, log on to freekeene.com. There will be information posted on there, I'm sure, and we'll talk a little bit as we get closer. We're also trying to raise some money to not only get on more stations across New Hampshire and the United States, but also for Porcupine Freedom Festival. We hope to be broadcasting live from there. June 14th, we can do it with your help. Log on to freemindstv.com, and from there, there's several ways you can chip in. Check, money order, PayPal, Google Checkout, whatever way works best for you. We're trying to raise some money so we can broadcast live, as well as get on some more stations. So if you think this program's important, you want to see it continue, you want to see it grow, freemindstv.com, help us out. All right. Also, as we mentioned, there's the audio podcast. We are starting to kick it off. We're starting to get more and more listeners and starting to get a little bit more comfortable with it. Donors gave us the money to buy podcasting equipment, so we're doing a once a week at least audio podcast where it's a little bit longer, hear different news stories. As Nick said, we talked about this homeschool ruling when it first came out. It was completely outrageous, and we complained about it for quite a while on there. There's all sorts of different stuff.
You get to cover a lot more content and a lot of stuff that we just can't fit in the show because we have so much to cover. Instead
of reading the first paragraph of the article, we can maybe read the whole thing sometimes. Also, just remind you, if you want to see the rest of Rick Van Wickler's interview we did, the second half will be on next week's show, so tune in then. It's going to be a full show. Well, it's been Toby here with you.
And Nick.
And we will be back with an all-new extra special show next week. Hope you're having a good day, evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. Join us online, freemindstv.com. Thanks so much. Have a great night.
We now are a nation known to start war. We feel compelled because of our insecurity that we have to go over and attack these countries to maintain our empire. We have over 700 bases. We're in 130 countries, and they're talking about bombing Iran. It is such a dramatic change from what is truly American and truly constitutional.
I don't want to run the world. The Constitution doesn't give me the authority to run the world. We ought to mind our own business is what we need to do. Spending overseas, wasted money. This is a continuation of a revolution. It is a peaceful revolution. It's up to you to spread this message around this country. This is an American cause. It's a cause of freedom. There's something going on in this country, and it's big. Spread the message. Thank you.